Hello there. Events on the ground in the EU show that those who voted for right-wing parties in the European Union parliamentary elections are right to be concerned. While the left takes to street protests in the EU, some of them violent, just because the recent EU elections did not go their way, the people that they vilify and call the far right are proven again to be rightly concerned and are really the right so fars. It's now emerging that 2 truckers from a company based in County Armagh in Northern Ireland were dragged out of their cabs and brutally attacked in Calais some days ago. Thankfully, they are both now well and back at work, but the images taken at the time and now up on X are unpleasant to say the least. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out who the perpetrators were likely to be, nor what their aims were. Although the trucking company concerned and the French police are staying very tight-lipped about the incident. And the UK press doesn't appear to be covering it either. If these people are prepared to go to these lengths to get into the back of a truck, what do you think they will get up to if we allow them into the country and they don't get exactly what they want? Now, had these violent perpetrators been deemed as far right, though, we all know exactly how the likes of the BBC would be covering it, don't we? And the news would already be out there in graphic, full-colour detail, wouldn't it? But still the hard left within the EU continue their post-EU election protests, with French police out and about in strength in Paris for a second night to deal with it. When will people wake up and realise the problem is not the so-called far right? It is the radicals at the hard left end of the political spectrum, coupled with those from another specific demographic. And all the while, here in the UK, it looks like the electorate will be following the usual uniparty state tradition of voting either for the red or the blue buttock. And right now it looks like the red buttock will be the victor. A red buttock with a huge supermajority to do as it pleases, to take us into a new age of woke endarkment, censorship and blasphemy laws. Well, what will our new lefty woke Labour government with a supermajority in Parliament be calling their EU friends and partners after this huge shift to the far right in European Union politics? Back in the day, during the Brexit campaign, the left was quite happily firing off abuse at the UK Independence Party, accusing its members of every nasty ism under the sun, wasn't it? Something that continues to this day. But now that EU voters are starting to reject the old wishy-washy woke politics of Brussels and are following a UKIP-style path, those Labour lefty UK ministers with their supermajority in Parliament will be forced to speak nicely of those they will be negotiating with, won't they? Those like Geert Wilders, Giorgia Meloni, Marine Le Pen, Viktor Orban, and possibly the replacement to Germany's Olaf Scholz, whoever that turns out to be. And Scholz is under the political hammer in Germany at the moment, be in no doubt. Yes, our establishment worthies will be forced to go and be ultra nice to those that are now following in the footsteps of UKIP, shaking their hands with smiles for the press. You know, the usual thing. And when the press starts to ask some serious questions, if ever, about this further on down the line, Starmer and his motley cabinet will flounder about while trying to deodorise the whiff of hypocrisy. 1 minute they'll be calling ordinary people in the UK far-right racists and bigots, then toddling off to the EU to cordially meet with those lovely EU politicians that now have exactly the same views as the ordinary UK voter. but talking about their EU counterparts in the glowing terms of valued EU friends and partners who we have shared values with. You could not make it up. If they want to stick by their anti-UKIP style rhetoric of abhorring the far right, then they should be refusing to deal with EU politicians who hold similar views, shouldn't they? But they won't. The hidden Labour hierarchy prize is to shoehorn the UK back into the EU, whatever the damage done. And I bet they'd do a deal with the devil to achieve just that. Now the hard communist left within the Labour Party is currently holding back until Starmer gets the keys to number 10. And I would imagine that their original plan had been to wait until he has those keys, then manoeuvre to replace him, possibly with the help of the civil service unions, and then start slowly signing us up slice by slice back into the arms of the grateful EU. But how can they do that if the EU is openly at war with itself as the old guard tries to stop the far right getting its way? How can that avowedly net zero Labour Party negotiate green stuff with an EU that is cooling on the topic of global warming? How can Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner, Yvette Cooper, David Lammy and Rachel Reeves talk nice and cuddly to the new EU regime about open borders, for example? How would a conversation with the Swedish government about the need for more people from a certain demographic being needed to instill peace into the country go? And that is a serious topic, given how much importance Labour now places on that demographic. Labour is gearing up to shape the whole country's foreign policy based on that demographic's wishes. Now, one of the interesting things to come out of these recent EU parliamentary elections is that the younger people are the ones that appear to be choosing to support parties on the right wing of politics. You know, the ones who it is assumed will always opt for the fluffy woke left. And we make the same assumption here in the UK. Maybe it's not true. Maybe Labour would be shooting itself in the foot were it to go down the route of extending the voting franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. Now that would be a nice bit of karma, wouldn't it? And while our politicians will be advancing olive branches and giving stuff away for so-called soft power, those new EU politicians who believe in looking after the interests of their own people and countries will rightly be playing hardball. And somehow I doubt that the Labour Party will be reciprocating. No, they are much more likely to salami slice Gibraltar and Northern Ireland away than protect UK interests. Labour would rather follow any UK damaging ruling from the ECHR than leave it to our advantage. Starmer's mob will be more about playing to the WEF Davos attendees and whoever takes over from the 86-year-old Klaus Schwab than be bothered about defending the interests of the UK. In fact, given his publicly stated preferment of Davos over Westminster, I would argue that Starmer believes that the interests of the UK are tied to whatever the WEF dictates. While the people of Northern Ireland and/or Gibraltar and the Falklands come to that wish to remain part of our UK family, I will fight for them to do so. I cannot say I see anything from any party on the left that says the same.